there's a way to make an entrance.
This is my destiny.
It was now a conspiracy of witches.
Download Veely today.
Conmen, the most devious of all criminals. Charming, cool and calculating, they betray trust and devastate lives, yet remain a complete enigma. We are about to explore the mysterious world of these master criminals, giving an unprecedented insight into the workings of the complex minds of some of the world's most cunning con men and women. We will reveal the detail and the intricacies of their elaborate crimes and uncover how they were dramatically brought to justice. In this show, we uncover the incredible story behind the Frumpy Femme Fatale who cruelly and callously adopted an audacious range of fictitious roles in the northeast of England so she could heartlessly seduce lovelorn men and gain access to their bank accounts.
Emma Golightly was a kind of female love rat con woman.
She did a fantastic job on these poor men that she got to marry.
Over 2 short years, Emma Golightly posed as a high-flying doctor, a millionairess and tragic cancer victim, and conned at least 6 known victims out of £250,000.
I thought I'd hit the jackpot, to be totally honest. Head over heels, I was totally in love.
Emma Golightly's one-woman quest to con was so insatiable, she even walked down the aisle and pledged her eternal love to her victims in order to get her hands on their money.
She lived for today and it didn't matter about tomorrow.
A very dangerous lady, I would say, a very, very dangerous lady.
Emma Golightly was born in 1984. Growing up in a suburb of Newcastle in the northeast of England, her early life was seemingly uneventful.
She came from a good family. It seemed to be a fairly stable background and a good background that she came from.
But one suspects that she did have sort of aspirations to a much better, more exciting, glamorous lifestyle.
And these aspirations manifested themselves in 2004, as detectives subsequently discovered. Emma Golightly reportedly stole £7,000 from her mum's bank account and spent a further £3,500 on her credit card, leaving the mother who lovingly raised her crippled with debts. Despite Emma Golightly's cruel exploitation of her own family, her mother never called the police.
She's spending thousands of pounds on her mum's credit card, getting shoes and bits and pieces, all the things in life that we would all like, that maybe look good to other people, but are really quite superficial. But she obviously felt that she wanted these things, but there was no attempt to get a job and actually buy these things herself, as most of us would. She felt that she could get them through another person, and really she got away with that. So her first experiences of defrauding somebody were good. She got away with it, no harm done.
Even sort of mother-daughter bond isn't proof against the depredations of the con artist because they don't really have a conscience. But also I think it's often a pattern with con artists, they start young with petty criminality.
That same year, in May 2004, Emma began her serial con, ensnaring men who were looking for love in the Lonely Hearts columns.
Basically, all of the gentlemen who've been scammed by Emma, she met through internet dating sites. She'd put a profile of herself onto the internet, which people had then corresponded to via email. The email had then led to sort of a meeting, and the beginnings of relationships had been sprung up, basically.
Before she was on the internet, she would also use Lonely Hearts columns in newspaper. And both of those arenas are very good for a con artist because you get what you call a self-selecting mark, effectively. The marks volunteer, they come to you. And in particular, you know they're vulnerable to a potential con because they're lovelorn, they're looking for love. So that advertises them as a mark right off the bat.
Part of me wants to say, well, she's your femme fatale, she's your confidence trickster who uses her considerable sexual charms. In actual fact, when you see her, she doesn't really appear to meet that. She's At the risk of sounding catty, she's hardly a femme fatale, but she was clearly able to use some sort of charm in order to manipulate men.
And the first known man Emma Golightly charmed was Chris Williams. Like the many victims Emma would target in the future, Emma met Chris online, and after emailing they met up and romance blossomed. Chris was a successful 31-year-old who ran an engineering company in Gateshead. He believed the girl he was dating was a wealthy 23-year-old who worked for her successful solicitor father. In reality, it was all a sham. 20-year-old Emma had even lied about her age, adding 3 years, but the con woman could play the role like a pro, easily passing herself off as a successful professional 20-something. Her ploy had worked. Emma Golightly had created an attractive, appealing persona, and it had seduced her suitor.
Emma Golightly was obviously a past master practitioner of the sweetheart scam. That was the basis of her scam. She would sell herself as a rich businesswoman in search of love, and it was an important part of her scam that she appeared to be rich, because of course that immediately sets them at ease and stops them from thinking he's a gold digger.
But that is exactly what Emma Golightly was. Chris Williams believed Emma was the perfect partner, but the romance was a twisted and devious way of gaining access to his credit card so her fantasies of a glamorous life could be made a reality, secretly spending his money like it was going out of fashion.
And she was using the guy's credit cards basically to pay for shopping, to pay for food shopping from the supermarket delivery sites. And she was running up astronomical bills at hotels. It was all predominantly service industry, hairstyles, haircuts, makeup. It was offending on a simple scale, but it led to, when they added it all up, it came to quite a lot of money.
Coming up, Emma Golightly takes her callous con to a cruel new level, making the man who loves her believe she is dying just to further fulfill her warped fantasies.
She would tell men that she needed to marry before she died, basically.
I would describe Emma Golightly as a very good con woman.
A con artist with no conscience, Emma Golightly used and abused men who were looking for love.
She would convince lonely hearts, men, that she was the woman of their dreams.
She was such a good actress. What she said, you daren't question. She'd look you in the eye and say it.
It was quite clear that Emma would go on and ensnare these men.
In 2004, Emma Golightly had met her first victim, Chris Williams, a company director from Newcastle upon Tyne, through the Lonely Hearts pages. As Emma Golightly gained access to her new beau's bed, she also gained access to his credit card details and started secretly spending.
She was practicing effectively credit card fraud on a lot of these people, so she was stealing their money directly, and she was okay, she was blowing it in the here and now. She was going on expensive holidays rather than secreting it away in a bank account, but it's a classic characteristic of con artist psychology. They don't think about the future. They're not about laying away financial nest eggs for their security in old age. They don't really think like that,
And she was running up astronomical bills at hotels. It was all predominantly service industry, hairstyles, haircuts, makeup.
Emma Golightly's spending sprees were not just about pampering herself. She would also shower Chris with gifts, reinforcing her utterly fictitious backstory that she was a wealthy, successful woman. In reality, every penny Emma spent was going on her lover's credit card.
She would offer convincers to her suitors. She'd buy them expensive presents, but she'd do it using their money because she was ripping them off at the same time. Convincer is where, in a traditional scam, where you're trying to convince the mark to buy into your scam, is that you allow them to make a bit of money back, and that's the convincer. And quite often the convincer is actually paid out of their initial investment, so it doesn't even cost you anything, but it's just enough to make them think, hey, this really works.
Emma was about to raise the stakes of her con further. She told the cruelest lie imaginable to help her get what she wanted, heartlessly devastating the life of the man who loved her along the way. Early into her relationship with Chris Williams, she lied and told him she had survived breast cancer. With the seeds of her fictional tragic past sown and Chris now emotionally involved, she hit him again with another lie, her most brutal yet. Emma told her lover that the cancer had returned, and this time there was no hope. She was dying.
One of the most shocking elements of the Emma Golightly case is her cavalier use of the claim that she was suffering from terminal disease, like cancer, which is sounds horrible and despicable, but if you don't have a conscience, that sort of thing doesn't really bother you. But what's interesting from a technical point of view is that it allowed her to do what we call deadlining, which is where you kind of put a hurry up on the mark, basically, and it pressures them into making quick decisions and making wrong decisions. So obviously if you tell your suitor that you've got cancer, then that kind of helps to pressure them into marrying you quickly.
And this is exactly what Emma Golightly did. Chris Williams believed Emma was dying of terminal breast cancer, and she had one dying wish. She didn't want to die unwed. Chris proposed in September 2004, just 5 months after meeting, and despite innocently playing a role in her sick fantasy, he was the model fiancé.
He had a contract business and he lost a lot of contracts because he was having to take her to the Newcastle General Hospital for appointments, but she would never let her come in and speak to the consultant.
It was all a cruel charade, but just 7 months after meeting Chris, in December 2004, Emma, the dying bride, and Chris Williams married at Gateshead Registry Office just 2 days before Christmas. Emma's wicked web of lies had worked. She was living out her desires with no thought about the consequences of her actions and the person whose life she was destroying.
She probably fantasised about it as a child, you know, the wonderful wedding and the beautiful home and people respecting her for her high-flying career.
Was that about the actual ceremony itself? Because it's great to wear a white dress and be the centre of attention and feel loved and feel cared for. I'm sure that must have been part of it. But you have to wonder, did she want to be married because then she would be more entitled to their money? Was it just that she thought, well, this is a great way to profit?
Unbeknownst to Chris Williams, he was footing the bill for the whole wedding. His new wife had used his credit card to pay for everything, including a honeymoon to Jamaica, which he thought was a gift from Emma's fictitious solicitor father.
After she'd got married, it was just spend, spend, spend.
She went into 2 Ross Lee dealerships, one in Newcastle, one down in York, I believe, where she attempted to obtain top-of-the-range Land Rover Vogues for in excess of £60,000 by passing herself off as this businesswoman.
The fact that she would go into these car dealerships and order a Porsche and order a Range Rover, knowing she didn't have the money to pay for it herself.
Emma visited a garage with her new husband Chris, where she offered to buy him a £42,000 Land Rover. Emma even asked for a second vehicle for her mum, costing £13,000. Even though Emma didn't have a penny to her name, she guaranteed she would pay for the cars if Chris would pay the £1,000 deposit. Her husband paid the money, but when Emma failed to settle the balance, the cars were repossessed. Emma's luck was running out.
And she was going to get caught. It was clearly going to fall apart around her ears. I mean, how was she going to explain the fact that, well, she didn't die for a start? So it was always just instant gratification at that point. She was always going to be caught. She was always going to be rejected.
After 4 months of marriage, Chris was becoming more and more suspicious. And the final straw came when his credit card bill came in. Emma Golightly had fraudulently spent £17,000 on her husband's credit card. Emma wrote him a cheque for £12,000, but it bounced. Emotionally and financially conned, Chris threw Emma out of the marital home. But initially, he was too embarrassed to go to the police.
Well, one of the problems when it came to actually investigating the crimes was that men didn't want to come forward. Now, I don't know whether this is something specific to do with, you know, sex, basically, or gender, in that men don't want to put their hands up and say, well, I've been conned, I've been manipulated. I'm sure they felt incredibly embarrassed, but I think anybody would, to be honest. I think in any kind of scenario of this type, the person who's been taken in a very cruel and callous way, somebody has given themselves to somebody. They've agreed to spend the rest of their life with somebody, and then to find out that actually it's a joke and the joke is on you, that's going to be humiliating. You're not really going to want to talk about that in too much detail, are you? You're probably going to want to crawl under a rock somewhere.
I think Emma was a very good con woman. She was so good at it. I think if you get a woman that's good at lying, she surpasses any man there. I wasn't surprised because she was a woman, it was the fact she was so ordinary.
Emma may have looked ordinary, but she had a taste for the high life and had found a way to fund her fantasies, seduce a man and spend his cash. Although her marriage had imploded, she had a backup plan, and just 3 weeks after being thrown out by her first victim, she moved in with her second victim. Emma met Andrew Norris via her hunting ground of dating websites, again posing as a high-flying businesswoman. Andrew was also from the Newcastle area, and within a month discovered Emma, his new love interest, had spent £5,000 on his credit card, living the high life and staying in the area's best hotels. Once Andrew discovered Emma's lies, theft and deceit, the relationship ended, and once again he did not immediately go to the police. However, Andrew did not know the full extent of Emma's duplicity. While she was living with Andrew, she had begun grooming her third victim, Colin Fitton, a media executive also living in the northeast. Emma had once again seduced her prey online, only this time Emma was going by the name Chelsea Taylor, the owner of a successful bridal wear shop. And before long, the familiar cruel and callous themes were beginning to surface in their relationship. As with her first victim, Chris Williams, Emma told Colin she had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and didn't want to die unmarried. It was all lies, but the wedding date was set for the 31st of October 2005, Halloween.
Well, we girls all love a good wedding, don't we? And it seemed that Emma really loved a good wedding because she'd almost been married 2 times by the time she was 22. That was part of the pattern of her behaviour. She would tell men that she needed to marry before she died, basically, and they would fall for that.
She's not the femme fatale as you would expect to see. I believe that Emma managed to carry off these deceptions basically by the stories of wealth that she had and the promise that she would make them wealthy at the end of it.
Classically, con artists always depended on the mark's greed, and that was their justification as well as their motivation, because they would say, well, he had it coming, or only greedy people get suckered, or people get suckered by their own greed, you know, and that would sort of relieve them of responsibility. So I think there's definitely a case to be made that she was maybe counting on a kind of mercenary element to it, but then we can't really impugn the motives of these poor marks, because for all we know they were really in love.
There was a problem with the impending nuptials. Emma was still legally married to her first husband and victim. In fact, the couple hadn't even reached their first wedding anniversary. Colin was completely oblivious to his fiancée's lies, but it seems bigamy was a step too far even for Emma, or Chelsea as Colin knew her. On the day of the wedding, the registrar, rather conveniently, never turned up to perform the nuptials. It is highly likely Emma never even booked the registrar, so on Halloween 2005, with no wedding, the couple settled for a blessing.
But these were events that were organised and people turned up in good faith, believing that this man and this woman were devoting their whole life together, and in each case, a large number of the congregation thought they knew, that Emma had a terminal illness, had cancer, and was going to die.
I think it's interesting that Emma does seem to have this fixation, if you like, about weddings. The fact that she married one of her victims, she got to the ceremony with a second, albeit it would have been a bigamous marriage if it had actually happened. But that really tends to suggest that maybe it's this fantasy aspiration that she was going for, that fix of all the preparations leading up to a wedding, the dress, all the fact that you're this centre of attention for a whole day and everyone looks at you and tells you how wonderful and beautiful you are. It's a little girl's dream, but clearly that little girl didn't grow up very much.
Emma still had her big day as the blushing bride, but managed to do it without committing bigamy. Her fiancé believed he was footing half of the wedding bill. Naturally, Emma was secretly paying her half with her new victim's credit card.
Basically, she arranged to marry Colin, and I believe it was down at the arrangements had all been made at the Copthorne Hotel on the quayside. She arranged for all of Colin's guests. I think there was in excess of 100 guests which would travel into the area, and they were to be put up in the Copthorne and the Hilton Hotel. Emma agreed to pay for everything, and she arranged the booking, she booked them all into the hotels, and in effect it was all coming off Colin's credit card.
A week later, the credit card bills came in, and the relationship imploded like Emma's previous liaisons. But Emma Golightly continued her cycle and compulsively moved on to her next lonely heart, victim number 4, Stephen Bell, using the exact same approach. Stephen again met Emma online, but as far as the innocent man looking for love was concerned, she was not a compulsive con woman, but a successful businesswoman called Taylor Williams.
She picked one guy up, and once they got to the fact where they were starting to be suspicious of her and starting to ask questions, difficult questions which she couldn't answer, she basically moved on to the next one. So I believe she was always on the internet, she was always on the lookout for people to hook up with, and sometimes it was only a matter of weeks between moving out of one person's house and moving in with somebody else. So she was quite quick on the mark on that nature.
But as 2005 came to an end and Emma was seducing and scamming Stephen, she also branched out and started a different scam. This time she was not Emma Golightly, dying bride, she was Taylor Golightly, high-flying doctor. Coming up, Emma's doctor scam becomes the most twisted and sinister con yet.
She said unfortunately the boy had died through the night.
Emma Golightly is clearly a confidence trickster.
Emma Golightly was a serial con woman who seduced lonely hearts in order to get her hands on their credit card details.
She's conned a lot of people out of a lot of money.
Seen you, I've beaten you, you're next, I've beaten you as well, who's next? Beat them all.
In late 2005, as well as posing as a high-flying businesswoman to scam her latest lonely heart victim, Stephen Bell, out of money, Emma Golightly had adopted the persona of a consultant surgeon called Dr. Taylor Golightly, who met Jill Granger when she came to join her gym.
She said she was a surgeon and she worked at the Nuffield up in Newcastle, which is like a private hospital. And basically she's one of the consultants there. When she filled in the forms and everything, she said her name was Taylor Golightly. It wasn't Emma Golightly, it was the Dr. Taylor Golightly.
She posed as a surgeon. Not many more impressive authority figures in our society than a top surgeon or top consultant. So that's quite a good scam, basically. Most people will go along with you, they'll be impressed with you, they'll assume that what you're saying is the truth. You have this aura that's lent to you by this assumed authority, which is bogus.
The reason why we thought she was so credible was she used to come in with a briefcase and a laptop and everything, with a suit on. And this one day she actually went on a mobile phone and she was going, oh, well, give the lad so many mils of whatever the technical term was, I don't know, and put him on a drip and do this, that and the other.
Emma would, on a number of occasions, have fictitious telephone calls with purporting to be with her PA. I can't remember the girl's name who she said it was, but she would, on the phone in front of people, talking to this PA, and obviously this person never existed, and she was obviously talking to herself on the telephone.
But yeah, she had 2 mobile phones, so she'd actually rang herself and answered the phone, and she was talking to herself on the other phone. But it was all part of the plan, I think, to make you think that she did actually work at the Nuffield.
Dr. Taylor Golightly, as Emma was now known, quickly discovered Jill Granger's partner, Michael, coincidentally worked with the NHS, and so took the opportunity to live out her warped fantasy life in full.
I met Dr. Golightly through my partner, Gillian. At the time I was doing some consultancy work within the health industry, and Dr. Taylor Golightly was doing some work for the Nuffield hospitals at the time. And so she said that she was looking for some funding to deliver training.
Emma, in her new persona of Dr. Taylor Golightly, said that part of her role at the private Nuffield hospital, as well as working as a surgeon, was to spend £1.25 million on training within the hospital. She suggested Michael Jeffels and his colleagues present a proposal to her on how to allocate her massive pot of money. Bizarrely, this scam had no financial benefit for Emma, apart from making her seem very important. And because she had nothing to gain financially, Michael had no reason to be suspicious.
I suggested that Dr. Taylor Golightly came into the office and spoke to the managing director, Alan Findlay, which she did. At first impressions, the body language was a very confident body language. The way she was dressed was very professional. She carried a laptop in a case. She talked, very well. And all the indications at that moment in time were that, and it seemed very feasible, that she was a doctor. It's
very important for a con artist. Appearance is everything. Certainly with the right kind of window dressing, if you like, and attitude and the way you hold yourself and present yourself can sort of compensate for anything that she might have been lacking, arguably.
Certainly myself and Alan at that moment in time didn't think anything untoward. And then we made further arrangements for me to meet her in her office at the Nuffield Hospital. These meetings started to be cancelled an hour before, and there seemed to be a pattern forming.
Although concerns were being aroused because Dr. Taylor Golightly always cancelled meetings at short notice when they were arranged at the hospital, the stakes were high enough for Michael and his colleagues. They were looking at securing a £1.25 million training contract from the scamming surgeon. They had a lot to gain, but bizarrely, apart from the odd free lunch, Emma wasn't making a penny from her lies.
Well, of course, a lot of crimes are committed just through greed. But whenever you get something that's a little bit more unusual, I always look for two things. I look for, a financial motive, the obvious motive, but I also look for what kind of need, emotional need, is this crime actually meeting in the individual. Now for Emma, I think that she's somebody who desperately wanted attention, wanted to be noticed, wanted to be validated as a human being. So part of me feels almost a little bit sorry for her, but obviously, look at me, validate me, care for me. It's not an excuse for what she's done.
From the moment that we met her, obviously she was, as you can imagine, was somebody with 1.25 million, centre of attention, being taken round, and if you like, as you would with any potential new client that had a lot of money, paraded in front of the staff as, somebody who's worthwhile known, maybe going out for a meal, to discuss some of the aspects of the contract. And I honestly believe that that the more people were, if you like, looking after her and lauding her, then the more I think the confidence grew and the self-esteem grew. But it just did really snowball. Conversation could have been basically stopped by saying, look, unfortunately we haven't got the funding or some other excuse. But it just it just seemed to keep on getting bigger.
But Emma, or Dr. Taylor Golightly as she was known, didn't stop. In fact, more lies emerged. Unlike her wedding con, there was no monetary benefit for Emma Golightly, but it drew similarities as cancer became a tool in her scam. However, this time it wasn't her that was dying. It was a fictional young boy in her care who had a final wish that Michael could help happen.
Because the child, the little boy, had said he was interested in football, my partner, Michael, arranged for Alan Shearer and a few of the football lads to meet the little boy.
I've spoken to Graham Souness, not a problem. You'll be in the changing rooms, they'll get a signed football, a signed shirt, we'll do all this for you, we'll make it the best day of his life. And she said, well, he has these oxygen bottles and, and he's got to be wheeled in this sort of bed thing. To be fair to Newcastle United, and to Graham Souness, nothing was too much. And, Alan said, look, it'll not be a problem.
Everything was arranged, it was confirmed the night before. By the morning, she said, unfortunately, the boy had died through the night.
I rang to confirm to make sure she was still attending, but she said, I had a terrible night. The child's actually died. Can I ring you back? I'm quite emotional at the moment. I'm quite tired. Of course, your reaction is going to be, oh yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry. I'll catch you later on. I mean, obviously, we now know that child didn't exist, but it was a pretty tough phone call, and I had to. Although, like I said, it was. I had my doubts at that moment in time. I still had a visualization of, this poor child. Even though I thought, the child obviously didn't exist and was fictitious, but I guess it was just the thought that something so sad. And at a moment in time, I have to be honest, I didn't believe that anybody would lie about something like that. So again, it sort of, if you like, in a perverse way, added to the credibility.
The heartbreaking lie about the dying child could only quell Michael's suspicions for so long. The fake funds Emma was tempting him with kept growing, and as appealing as the vast sums were, he couldn't help but become suspicious.
Initially there was 1.25 million that she had for funding, then it increased to 1.5 million, and then it increased to 1.75 million. It seemed that every time she opened a drawer there was another £250,000. So I was just hoping that she kept opening a lot of drawers, and there was even more funding that was going to be found. But at that moment in time, alarm bells started to ring for me. I decided to try to find out a little bit about Taylor. I went to the Nuffield Hospital. I went to the main reception and asked for Dr. Taylor Golightly, and the receptionist said, I'm sorry, there's nobody with that name here. I said, there must be, we're accessing some funding for you. We're going to be delivering some NVQ training. She said, no, definitely not. I'll check on the register. There's no Taylor Golightly here. But I said, could you just double check to see if there's anywhere on any of the registers And this lady, bless her, she went through the whole files, and we were probably there about 15-20 minutes. And she said, no, there's definitely 100% nobody with that name that actually has ever worked in this hospital or any other hospitals that belong to the Nuffield. So we rang the police.
Michael had turned detective and contacted the police, but he wasn't alone. Months after being conned, Andrew Norris and Colin Fitton, Emma Golightly's second and third Lonely Hearts victims, had decided they weren't going to suffer in silence anymore. They also complained to the police about Emma Golightly's disturbing behaviour.
A gentleman by the name of Andrew Norris, who lives in Northumberland, reported that he'd had some fraudulent transactions on his credit card, and they'd been committed by giving us the name of Emma Golightly. So we started looking into that offence, identified who Emma was, and picked up where she lived in the Walker area of Newcastle, and then we followed it up from there. Following on from that, there'd already been a report of a similar incident by a gentleman by the name of Colin Fitton, who'd made similar allegations about Emma, and someone else was investigating that. So when we got the one in from the gentleman in Northumberland, we married the two up, and then we obviously went to try and have a chat with her.
The claims of Emma Golightly's twisted personas and criminal behaviour were now being investigated. Michael Jeffels, who had investigated the high-flying surgeon and discovered it was all lies, helped set up a police sting so the police could catch the 21-year-old con woman.
I actually said, Taylor, unfortunately, we've done a little bit of research and we know that you're not a surgeon. And she went, well, of course I'm a surgeon. And I said, well, I've actually been to Nuffield Hospital and you don't exist, that name doesn't exist there. And straight away, and again, the body language is very confident. She said, well, I've been telling you about this training, that's, do you now believe me that these staff need trained? And I said, well, Taylor, the police are here. And she went, oh. And the police came in and they said, can we have your name? She said, Dr. Taylor Golightly. They went, can we have your name again? She went, Dr. Taylor Golightly. And he says, the sergeant said, look at Emma, we're going to ask you one more time. Is your name Emma Golightly? She went, yes. And the next thing we knew, she was obviously being escorted off the premises, very discreetly. About probably a couple of hours later, I had a phone call from the police officer who said that she was actually in a cell at the minute, but that the police psychologist had turned around and said that they felt that they couldn't interview her alone, so it asked for the parents for to come down. So I believe her parent and her grandmother came down. And obviously they came back to us and said, look, do you want to prosecute? Because she'd obviously joined the gym on a membership, which, to be honest, the check had bounced. But we said, no, we don't want to prosecute, but quite clearly, she has problems.
Out of the goodness of their hearts, Michael and Jill didn't press charges, hoping Emma's encounter with the police would be the wake-up call she needed. The police released Emma, but continued investigating the complicated Lonely Hearts crime she was accused of. Astonishingly, she simply continued her twisted fantasy life, and a month later, she was back in police custody. Emma was still seeing her fourth known victim, Stephen Bell, who knew her as successful businesswoman Taylor Williams. And once again, Emma had played the cruel cancer card, claiming she was dying. Emma's multiple claims of cancer were never supported by a change in her appearance or loss of weight. She simply relied on the fact cancer is a taboo subject that is too horrific to be trifled with, and showed them medication, which were later discovered to be antihistamines and antidepressants. And the cancer victim lived every day like her last with Stephen Bell, showering him with gifts and expensive holidays. Like all her past victims, Stephen was footing the bill. But Emma had surpassed herself. She had duped him completely, spending a crippling £88,000 of his money. He called the police, and in January 2006, she was arrested and charged.
When all of the questions and all the evidence was put to her, she admitted it straight away. She put her hands up straight away, said, yes, it was me, I did it. I got the lads' cards out of their wallets, I noted down the credit card numbers, and she's quite humble in what she had to say. Whether or not that was the true Emma, or whether it was another facade she was putting across just because she was now almost the victim and she was being prosecuted basically for the offences for which she's committed, to this day I don't know. In the current climate, she had to be bailed because we had to get a decision from the CPS for authority to prosecute her. She came back to the police station. She was charged, I think, with 14 or 15 offences of deception, which I think came to a total of somewhere in the region of £170,000 worth of offences for which she'd been committed. Whilst she was on bail awaiting sentence, I got a call from a policeman in Wall's End asking about her, and it transpired that she was at it again.
Released on bail with a trial pending wasn't enough to deter Emma's compulsion to con and humiliate the men she met online. She met victim number 5, Richard Sutherland, and the same pattern emerged. It materialised she had secretly spent £3,000 on Richard Sutherland's credit card.
She'd befriended a gentleman by the name of Sutherland who lived in the Gateshead area of Tyneside, and basically she'd given him a £500 cheque for household expenses. Apparently she was lodging there. That cheque turned out to be a stolen chequebook from her mother's chequebook, and she was later arrested at her home address. It transpired that she'd been living at the Jesmond Dean Hotel, and she'd been paying for all these nights in accommodation and food with Mr Sutherland's credit cards.
And more of Emma's past victims were coming forward, delaying the trial. The case was transforming into an epic fraud case of unbelievable proportions. Emma was facing over 100 charges, had stolen and spent £250,000, and the police now knew of at least 5 Lonely Hearts victims. By September 2006, there was a hearing set for the end of the year. Emma was pleading guilty to her crimes against the heartbroken and financially devastated victims. But despite accepting her guilt, Emma still incredibly moved on to another unsuspecting Lonely Heart. Her 6th and final victim, Stephen Keenan.
I came into contact with Emma through the personal ads in the local paper. I was doing night shift security, so I wasn't going out that much. Needed a woman, so just followed it up and she replied to me ad. First met for a drink with a meal. I thought she wasn't the best looking woman, but getting to know her even on that first meeting just more than made up for it. I thought she had top personality in the world. I thought I was punching above my weight because she seemed really intellectual, well dressed, well paid. She told me she was a web designer on 60 grand a year. What I really found attractive about her was she was an absolute diamond in personality, and my friends and family all liked her as well. That's generally one of the most important things. They absolutely loved her from the outset. She's so put on the front of being so good with people. I mean, the professions that they've got between them is really diverse. But she could talk to every one of them on their level. People even said she was too good for me to ever say it, with what she was doing. I mean, university at 16, educated in America.
The personification of the perfect girlfriend, Emma was a consummate con artist when it came to getting money from her lovers. Simultaneously believable that she was successful, but that she was also having bank trouble and needed to borrow cash.
Her dad was a millionaire living in London, so she'll borrow a couple of £100,000 off me, or not 100,000, 100 or £1,000. Then when I saw a couple of weeks later, she'd say, my dad only had 300-400 quid or whatever, give me it back, but not all of it, always less than half. So because she's paid some back, I'd lend her some more when she asked, and I'll get a bit more back. So the money she got out of me, it wasn't in one lump sum, it was gradually accumulated. But now, apart from that, I bought her gifts left, right and centre.
I think without exception, all of the guys who were scammed by Emma were completely taken in by her. One guy in particular who I spoke to just couldn't believe how, in his words, how gullible he'd been, how he'd been taken in completely by the lies and the deceit which she'd spun, and how she'd managed to cover up the tracks of their credit card transactions being used to fund the lifestyle which she was promising them and almost delivering to a certain extent.
Emma had a variety of ways to keep the men in her life interested.
The texts I used to get off her quite often were quite explicit. We didn't actually consummate the relationship for quite a while, but now she was regularly sending me filthy texts and pictures.
The texts were a compensation for the lack of sex life, as Emma claimed she had been involved in abusive relationships in the past. And this, it seems, worked its magic, as it drove Stephen to prove he was not out to hurt Emma, and he was serious and committed to their relationship.
Took things slowly, then after a couple of months, she said that she loved me. I bought her a diamond and platinum engagement ring, proposed to her. She came across as really happy, she said yes. Started crying. I thought, that's it, this is the rest of my life sorted.
Coming up, Stephen Keenan's world is shattered after he discovers the truth about the North East's most prolific con artist.
There was her photo with the headline Man-Eater. I read the stories, and it wasn't about me, but it could have been all the lies that were told. She told me as well.
Emma Golightly was very much living in the moment.
In 2 short years, Emma Golightly serially conned at least 6 men out of £250,000.
She was very calculated in the way that she targeted these men.
She was like a comedian. She just put on a front to please whoever she spoke to.
The dream husband, the wonderful wedding, and she wanted it now.
And she used these guys' credit cards to facilitate that.
It was always going to fall around about her ears.
In December 2005, Stephen was head over heels in love and engaged to Emma Golightly. But little did Stephen know that he was simply the latest in a long line of victims Emma had cruelly, callously and systematically preyed upon for the last 2 years. Undeterred by the fact that she was on bail and was awaiting a court date for sentencing, Emma callously continued with her usual con and inevitably brought cancer into her relationship with her victim. Only this time, her fictional use of cancer was even more disturbing and unnerving than her usual cancer con.
She rang me one night when I was meant to be going out with the lads, in tears, saying, "Oh, my mum's just died of cancer." She told me my mum was in hospital beforehand, but no, I just didn't expect it. I was there for all the time, but she said she didn't want a sympathy card. She said that she'd already got too many of them and she wanted to try and move on as soon as possible, which I could understand because I know people deal with grief in different ways. But then when I actually went round there and met her stepmother, I later found out that was her mum.
Now, most of us would not lie about the death of a relative, and we would not lie about cancer. We would be inhibited against that. It's just not something that we would feel it was acceptable to do. Now, she did this routinely, and I think certainly a lot of it was to do with gaining sympathy, gaining attention, and being cared for. So her emotional needs were being met by her lies, as well as her financial needs.
I mean, she even told me she had a scare for throat cancer, but all of her big lies evolved around cancer in one way or another. She either had it, somebody she knew had it, her mum died of it. I don't know if she's got a fixation through her childhood or whatever, has lost somebody, or if it's just because she's so clever and she knows that people don't question it. But everything was around the cancer.
Busy supporting his seemingly grieving fiancée, Stephen Keenan was unaware that his con artist wife-to-be had been arrested and charged for conning and fleecing her past lovers. Although her final victim was about to discover the devastating truth, along with everyone else in the Newcastle area.
It all finished when I woke up to a text message on my phone, "Don't read the papers, it's all lies." I went down, saw the papers, there was her photo with the headline "Man-Eater." I read the stories, and it wasn't about me, but it could have been all the lies that were told. She told me as well. I tried to get her to explain herself. She said wouldn't admit a single thing about it.
Stephen Keenan realised he was simply another of the callous con woman's victims and ended their relationship. And less than a month after the discovery his engagement was a sham, Stephen's ex-fiancée appeared in Newcastle upon Tyne Crown Court to be sentenced for the 17 charges she was pleading guilty to. These charges included theft and obtaining property by deception. In addition to these charges, there were a further 88 offences Emma admitted and asked to be taken into account. Over 2 years, Emma Golightly had fraudulently and relentlessly spent £250,000 on her victims' credit cards.
It's somewhere up to £20,000-30,000, I think. I got off relatively lightly, but that was possibly due to the fact that she got caught when she did. If it hadn't have done, I might have ended up as one of the worst.
When she came into court, you were struck by the fact that he was this young, plain-looking, normal girl who cried several times during what was a relatively short hearing, and she just struck you as, how could she do all these things? How could that person sitting there be capable of the lies and the deceit? She was so young and she just looked so ordinary, but what was going through her mind, I don't know.
Emma Golightly's first victim was her mother, but she has consistently stood by her daughter.
I think as tragic as all her victims have been, perhaps the person who's been forgotten in Emma Golightly's life is her mother, and the fact that she stole something like £7,000 on a credit card from her, as well as other money. And her mother's never pressed charges, and she's standing by her daughter, and she's seeing her through this, and perhaps that's some sign of redemption for Emma in the future.
During the sentencing, the judge accepted Emma Golightly was suffering from a personality disorder, but her crimes were so serious that the only option was prison.
The judge said she needed help for this personality disorder, and he said that she didn't have any money now and was unlikely to have any, so she didn't have to pay compensation or costs, and he recommended that she should receive treatment in prison to make sure that she didn't do it again.
It was a shambles, to be honest, because they were playing on it was a mental illness, and hand on my heart, I don't believe she had a mental illness. She knew what she was doing.
She's certainly got some symptoms or some aspects of personality disorder, but that's not an excuse for what she's done. She was well aware that what she was doing was wrong. It was calculated to a large extent. Although she may say that she didn't have that much control over her behaviour, she had enough control that she was felt to be criminally responsible for her actions.
Emma Golightly's serial bride scam made national news, and despite over 80 offences being mentioned in court, she only served 1/4 of her 2-year custodial sentence.
She done 6 months in an open prison and the rest of it on a tag for £250,000. It's not really a deterrent for other people in the future.
Astonishingly, on release after serving the 6 months, Emma Golightly returned to her local community, who labelled her a man-eater. All her victims can do is regret the day they met the compulsive con woman.
I feel stupid, angry, regretful. I don't know Emma. The person I know, I still miss, but she never existed. But actually Emma Golightly, I've got no feelings whatsoever because I never actually knew her.